There was once a fisherman who lived with his wife in a small, weathered pigsty near the restless edge of the sea. It was not the sort of place that people dreamed of living in. Its walls were crooked, patched in places with driftwood, its roofs sagging slightly under years of salt-laden winds. When the tide came high, the air around it filled with the scent of brine and seaweed. When the tide went out, the ground lay damp and glistening with shells left behind by the waves. The fisherman's days were quiet, simple, and always the same. Each morning, before the first pale light stretched across the water, he would take up his rod and walk the narrow, sandy path to the shore. The beach was lined with stones, worn smooth by the endless breathing of the sea. He would sit there, patient and alone, watching the glittering ripples and feeling the pull of the waves through his fishing line. The sea was his companion. It was never the same twice. Some days, calm and shining, its surface like polished glass. Other days, restless, rolling in with white foam that hissed and whispered over the sand. He knew its moods as one might know the expressions of a lifelong friend. His wife, Ilsabo, was a practical woman, but the pigsty did not please her. A single low door creaked in the wind, and the damp found its way into the corners, no matter how often she swept. They had little in the way of comfort. A wooden table, 2 rough chairs, a narrow bed with a blanket that smelled faintly of the sea. Still, the fisherman did not mind their lot. The world was wide, and he needed little to be content: a good catch, a warm fire, and the steady rhythm of the tides. But Ilsabil often looked out toward the horizon with a certain hunger in her eyes, as though she imagined something better waiting beyond the reach of the waves. And so the days passed, each much like the one before, until the morning came when the sea, the fishermen, and the life they knew would change, all because of a single, extraordinary catch. It was a morning like many others, the sky pale and hazy, the air cool with the breath of the sea. The fisherman sat on his usual rock, the worn handle of his rod in his hands, the line drifting lazily in the water. Far out, the horizon lay hidden under a soft mist, and the tide moved with a slow, steady pull. For a long while, nothing happened. The water lapped gently at the shore, the gulls cried overhead, and the fisherman's thoughts drifted like the clouds above. Then, without warning, his float gave a sudden, sharp tug. It bobbed once, twice, and then vanished beneath the surface, as though pulled by some unseen hand. With a quick motion, the fisherman pulled on his line. It fought him at once, strong and alive, thrashing beneath the waves. Whatever he had hooked, it was no ordinary catch. The weight of it strained his arms. The pull of it was steady and deliberate, almost as if it knew exactly how to fight. The water broke, and there was a great fish, its scales flashing gold and silver in the morning light. Its eyes, large and dark, seemed almost to meet his own. As the fisherman lifted it from the sea, its body shimmered as though lit from within, and then it spoke. "Pray, let me live." The fish said, its voice clear and steady, "I am not a real fish. I am an enchanted prince. Throw me back into the water and let me go free." The fisherman froze. Never in all his years had he heard such a thing. A fish that talked and spoke like a man. He stared at it, the sunlight glinting off its scales, the line still trembling in his hands. "Oh," he said at last, a slow smile tugging at his lips. "You need not make so many words about it. I have no wish to keep a fish that can talk better for you to swim away as soon as you please." And with that, he loosened the line, bent down to the edge of the water, and lowered the fish back into the sea. For a heartbeat, the fish lingered, hovering in the shallows, its bright eyes fixed on him. Then, with a flick of its tail, it darted deep, leaving behind a long streak of red in the water. Not blood, but something stranger, like a thread of light sinking into the depths. The fisherman sat back on his rock, his rod resting beside him. He could hardly believe what had just happened, yet the sound of that strange, clear voice still echoed in his ears. It was a story worth telling, though he had no idea what his wife might think of it. The fisherman walked home along the sandy path, the salt wind brushing against his face. The tide had fallen low, leaving the beach scattered with shells and smooth bits of driftwood. He thought of the fish's strange voice, of the way its eyes had looked into his before it vanished into the depths. Their home, the small, weathered pigsty, came into view. Its crooked roof leaned against the wind, the thin smoke from the chimney curling upward into the pale sky. At the doorway stood Ilsebil, her hands on her hips, her sharp eyes narrowing as she watched him approach. "Well," she said, even before he had stepped inside, "did you bring anything back?" The fisherman shook his head, setting down his rod. "No fish today," he said slowly, "but I caught something else. A great fish. No, not a fish. Not truly. It was an enchanted prince. He spoke to me, yes, spoke and begged me to let him go. And so, I did." Ilsebil's eyes widened, her expression shifting from surprise to something sharper. "You let him go?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "And you asked for nothing? Nothing at all?" The fisherman shrugged. "What should I have asked for?" He was no ordinary fish. It seemed wrong to make a bargain of it. I was glad enough to let him swim away. Ilsebil crossed her arms, her gaze sweeping over the low, crooked walls of the pigsty. "Oh, we live here, in this filthy hut, and you had the ear of an enchanted prince, and you asked for nothing." Her tone was incredulous, almost scolding. "We have what we need," the fisherman said gently. "We have a roof, a fire, a roof that leaks, a fire that smokes, and no room to turn around in." She interrupted. "No, husband, this will not do. You must go back, find the fish. Tell him that your wife does not wish to live in a pigsty. Tell him we want a snug little cottage, clean, with space enough to breathe." The fisherman hesitated. He did not like the thought of troubling the fish again, of calling upon him so soon after granting him freedom. Ilsebil's eyes were fixed on him, bright and determined. "At least try," she said. "You'll see he will be glad to help us." And though the fisherman's heart was heavy at the thought, he knew there was no refusing her. With a quiet sigh, he picked up his rod once more and turned toward the sea. The fisherman walked slowly back down the narrow path toward the shore. The air felt different now, heavier, as though it carried more than just the salt from the waves. He could hear the sea long before he saw it, the steady hush and pull of the tide echoing between the rocks. When he stepped onto the beach, he stopped. The water no longer shone its usual clear blue. Instead, the waves rolled in with an odd, shifting color, streaks of pale yellow blending into green, the way sunlight might look if it were caught in deep glass. The sight made him pause, his fingers tightening around the worn handle of his rod. The sea was calm, but there was something watching in it. He could feel it, not with his eyes, but somewhere deeper, the way a fisherman feels the weight of a fish long before he sees the line move. He took a breath, stepped closer to the edge, and let the damp sand sink beneath his boots. Then, in a voice steady but low, he called out the words, just as he remembered them. "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife, Ilsebil, will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." For a moment, there was only the sound of the waves curling and breaking against the shore. Then, from beneath the colored water, a shadow began to rise, slow and smooth, as though the sea itself had chosen to take shape. The fish surfaced. Just as before, scales glinting gold and silver under the strange light, eyes clear and unblinking. His voice was calm, almost curious. "Well, fisherman, what is her will? What does your wife want of me?" The The fisherman shifted uneasily, his voice quiet. She says that when I caught you, I ought to have asked you for something. She does not like living in the pigsty any longer. She wishes for a snug little cottage, nothing grand, only something better than what we have. A fish's dark eyes seemed to hold him in place. Go home then, it said. She is in the cottage already. While the fisherman could reply, the fish dipped beneath the surface and was gone, leaving only a ripple that shimmered yellow and green before fading into the ordinary movement of the tide. The fisherman stood for a moment, unsure what to make of it. But the words were clear, and there was only one way to see if they were true. He turned and began to walk home, the strange colors of the sea still lingering in his mind. The fisherman's boots crunched softly on the sandy path as he made his way back from the shore. He half expected to see the same crooked pigsty waiting for him. Its roof leaning against the wind, its walls patched and worn. But as he rounded the last bend, he stopped in his tracks. It was gone. In its place stood a neat, whitewashed cottage with a roof of clean red tiles. The small windows gleamed in the afternoon light, each framed with shutters painted a soft, deep green. Smoke curled from a sturdy stone chimney. The front door stood open as though waiting to welcome him. At the threshold stood Ilsebill, eyes bright, her face lit with a smile he had not seen in years. Well, husband, she called, come in. Is this not far better than the filthy pigsty we had? Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of bread, baking somewhere out of sight. The floors were clean and smooth underfoot, and in place of the damp straw mats were woven rugs in soft colors. To one side lay a cheerful little parlor, its chairs cushioned, its small table polished to a warm shine. To the other was a snug bedchamber with a thick quilt on the bed. And beyond that, a kitchen with a wide hearth where a pot simmered gently outside. Behind the cottage stretched a tidy little garden. Neat rows of herbs and flowers ran alongside plots of vegetables, and fruit trees cast soft shade over the far corner. A low fence enclosed a courtyard where ducks and chickens wandered lazily, their soft clucking and quacking adding life to the still air. The fisherman took it all in slowly, almost afraid to blink, as though the sight might vanish. How happily we shall live now, he said at last, his voice carrying both wonder and relief. Yes, said Ilsebill, her hand resting on the doorframe. We will try, at least. And for a time, they did. The days were peaceful, the air inside the cottage warm and safe, the garden full of life. But even as the fisherman settled into this new comfort, he did not see the way Ilsebill's eyes lingered on the horizon, searching for something more. For a week or two, the cottage was enough. The mornings began with the soft cluck of hens. In the courtyard, the smell of baking bread and the gentle warmth of the sun spilling through the windows. The fisherman tended to his nets, his wife to the garden. And the days passed with a quiet rhythm neither had known before. But comfort has a way of making people look beyond what they have. And so it was with Ilsebill. One bright morning, as the fisherman mended his nets in the shade of the garden wall, she came to him with a thoughtful look. Eyes swept over the neat cottage, the small courtyard, the tidy rows of vegetables and flowers. It is lovely here, she said slowly. Much better than the pigsty. But the fisherman looked up. But this place is far too small for us, she said at last. The garden is little, the courtyard crowded. I should like something grander, a large stone castle with wide halls and tall windows, where we can live in proper style. Fisherman frowned, setting aside his nets. Wife, we have only just come into this home. The fish has already given us far more than we had before. Should we not be content with this? Nonsense, she replied, brushing her hands against her apron. He will not refuse us. You caught him, you spared him. He owes us more than a mere cottage. Go to him again and tell him what I want. The fisherman shook his head, unease stirring in him. I do not like to trouble him again. He might grow angry. We should be happy here. Ilsabel's expression hardened, her gaze fixed on him like the steady weight of the tide. I say, he will do it willingly. Go, and you will see. And though the fisherman's heart was heavy, he knew from the firmness in her voice that there was no turning her mind. With a sigh, he rose, took up his rod, and set off toward the sea once more. The fisherman walked the familiar path to the shore, but the air felt different now. The wind that came off the sea carried no sparkle of salt or freshness. Instead, it was heavy, as if it had passed over water deep and troubled. When the beach came into view, he paused. The sea no longer shimmered with light as it had before. It lay in a dull, deep blue, the kind of color that hides what moves beneath the surface. The sky above it was pale and washed out, as though the day itself had lost some of its warmth. And though the waves were calm, there was a weight in their slow rise and fall, a quiet that was not peace, but waiting. The fisherman hesitated at the water's edge, the damp sand cold under his feet. For a moment, he thought of turning back, but his wife's words still pressed at him, sharp in his mind. He cupped his hands to his mouth and called, his voice carrying over the quiet water. O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife, Ilsabel, will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee. The surface stirred. A shadow rose slowly from the depths, darker than before, and then the fish appeared, its silver and gold scales muted. Under the dim light, its eyes as calm and unreadable as the sea itself. Well, fisherman, it said, what does she want now? The fisherman shifted uneasily, his voice low. She says, the cottage is too small. She wishes for a large stone castle to live in, with great halls, wide windows, and space enough for a queen. The fish regarded him for a long, quiet moment. Then it said, simply, go home. She is standing at the gate of it already. And before the fisherman could speak again, the fish slid beneath the surface, leaving only a faint swirl in the blue water. The fisherman stood for a moment, staring at the place where it had vanished, feeling the cold touch of the breeze. Then, he turned back toward home, wondering what he would find this time. The fisherman walked home along the winding path, his boots pressing into the damp earth. The air seemed heavier than before, and somewhere far out over the water, a gull's cry echoed, thin and distant. He thought of the fish's words, the stillness in its eyes, and felt a shiver run through him, though whether from the wind or from something deeper, he could not say. When he crested the rise where the pigsty and then the cottage had once stood, he stopped. The small, whitewashed walls were gone. In their place stood a vast stone castle, its towers reaching high into the gray blue sky. Its walls were strong and smooth, the kind that had stood for centuries and would stand for centuries more. Flags stirred lazily from the highest battlements, and a wide gate of black iron stood open, guarded by two tall sentinels in polished armor. Beyond the gates stretched a courtyard paved with clean stones. The sound of hooves and voices echoed faintly within, mixed with the clatter of servants going about their work. To one side, a row of stables stood ready. To the other, barns and storehouses. At the gate stood Ilsabel, dressed in a gown of deep green that caught the light like the surface of the sea. Her face glowed with pride, her smile wide and certain. See, husband, she called as he approached. Is this not grand? He stepped through the gate beside her, his eyes sweeping over the courtyard and the great doors beyond. Inside, the air was warm, carrying the scent of polished wood and burning fire. The rooms were high-ceilinged and richly furnished, the walls hung with tapestries that told stories he did not know. Golden chairs and long tables gleamed in the light of tall windows. and carpets, soft underfoot, ran the length of the great hall. Behind the castle, a garden stretched far and wide, edged with tall hedges and lined with fountains that murmured softly. Beyond that lay a park half a mile long, where sheep grazed lazily, deer moved in the shadows of trees, and hares darted through the grass. The fisherman took it all in with slow wonder. "Well," he said at last, "now we can live cheerful and happy for the rest of our lives." "Perhaps we may," Ilsabil replied, her gaze already turning toward the horizon. "But let us sleep on it before we decide." The fisherman walked home along the winding path, his boots pressing into the damp earth. The air seemed heavier than before, and somewhere far out over the water, a gull's cry echoed thin and distant. He thought of the fish's words, the stillness in its eyes, and felt a shiver run through him, though whether from the wind or from something deeper, he could not say. When he crested the rise where the pigsty and then the cottage had once stood, he stopped. The small, whitewashed walls were gone. In their place stood a vast stone castle, its towers reaching high into the gray-blue sky. Its walls were strong and smooth, the kind that had stood for centuries and would stand for centuries more. Flags stirred lazily from the highest battlements, and a wide gate of black iron stood open, guarded by 2 tall sentinels in polished armor. Beyond the gates stretched a courtyard paved with clean stone. The sound of hooves and voices echoed faintly within, mixed with the clatter of servants going about their work. To one side, a row of stables stood ready. To the other, barns and storehouses. At the gate stood Ilsabil, dressed in a gown of deep green that caught the light like the surface of the sea. Her face glowed with pride, her smile wide and certain. "See, husband?" she called as he approached. "Is this not grand?" He stepped through the gate beside her, his eyes sweeping over the courtyard and the great doors beyond. Inside, the air was warm, carrying the scent of polished wood and burning fire. The rooms were high-ceilinged and richly furnished. The walls hung with tapestries that told stories he did not know. Golden chairs and long tables gleamed in the light of tall windows, and carpets, soft underfoot, ran the length of the great hall. Behind the castle, a garden stretched far and wide, edged with tall hedges and lined with fountains that murmured softly. Beyond that lay a park half a mile long, where sheep grazed lazily, deer moved in the shadows of trees, and hares darted through the grass. The fisherman took it all in with slow wonder. "Well," he said at last, "now we can live cheerful and happy for the rest of our lives." "Perhaps we may," Ilsabil replied, her gaze already turning toward the horizon. "But let us sleep on it before we decide." The fisherman walked the now familiar path to the shore, each step slower than the last. The wind had picked up, carrying with it a sharp edge of salt and the faint scent of distant rain. It whispered through the grasses, bending them toward the sea as though urging him forward. When the beach came into view, he stopped to take in the sight. The water no longer shimmered blue, nor did it carry the strange yellow-green glow of before. Instead, it lay in a heavy, dark gray, the kind of gray that swallows color and hides the depths entirely. Here and there, ridges of white foam curled along the crests of the waves, and the sea seemed to breathe with a slow, uneasy rhythm. It was not the calm of peace, it was the calm of something waiting. The fisherman hesitated and stepped down to the water's edge, the sand cold and damp beneath his boots. He took a breath and called, his voice steady but softer than before. "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife Ilsabil will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." For a moment, nothing moved but the restless rise and fall of the waves. Then, from the gray surface, the fish rose, its scales dulled by the dim light, its eyes still clear, yet carrying something unreadable. "Well, fisherman," it said, in a voice that seemed quieter than before. What does she want now? The fisherman shifted uncomfortably, his gaze lowering. She wishes to be king. The fish regarded him for a long, still moment. Then it said simply, "Go home." She is king already. Before the fisherman could speak again, the fish slipped back beneath the water, leaving only the slow ripple of its passing. He turned away from the sea, the wind at his back, unsure whether the chill in his bones came from the salt air or from the thought of what he might find waiting for him at home. The fisherman's steps felt heavy as he walked back from the shore, the wind pushing gently at his back. Above him, the clouds were a muted silver gray, and in the distance, the castle towers rose higher than before, their banners snapping sharply in the breeze. When he reached the great gates, they were guarded not by 2 sentinels, but by a whole troop of soldiers. Their armor gleamed, their pikes stood tall, and the air was filled with the low roll of drums and the bright call of trumpets. The gates swung open at his approach, and he stepped into a courtyard, alive with movement lines of attendants, messengers on horseback, and banners unfurling in the wind. Inside the grand hall, the change was even more striking. The tapestries on the walls were richer, heavier, their threads shimmering with gold and deep crimson. The long carpets were thicker underfoot, muffling the sound of his steps as he walked toward the far end of the hall. There, on a throne of gold, set with diamonds, sat Ilsabel. Her gown was the color of royal blue at dusk, and upon her head rested a crown of pure gold, its rim studded with jewels that caught the light and threw sparks across the marble floor. On either side of her stood 6 maidens, each one a head taller than the next, their gowns flowing like waterfalls of silk. The fisherman stopped at the foot of the steps leading to her throne. "Well, wife," he said softly, "are you king now?" "Yes," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "I am king." He looked at her for a long moment, taking in the height of the throne, the brightness of the crown, the sheer grandeur of it all. "Wife," he said at last, "what a fine thing it is to be king. Now, surely we will never have anything more to wish for." Ilsabel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though there was something sharp in her eyes. "Never is a long time," she said. "I am king, it is true, but I began to think I should like to be emperor." The fisherman's brow furrowed, the weight in his chest returning. "Wife, why should you wish to be emperor? This is enough." But already he could see from her gaze that her mind was set. The golden light from the throne room still clung to the fisherman's eyes as he followed Ilsabel into her private chambers. Servants hurried to and fro, carrying trays of silver goblets and polished plates, while soft music drifted in from somewhere deeper within the castle. But the air between husband and wife was far from peaceful. Ilsabel removed her crown, setting it upon a stand where the jewels caught the candlelight in sharp, bright flashes. She turned to him, her expression already full of purpose. "Husband," she said, "I will be emperor." The fisherman shook his head, slowly, almost warily. "Wife, you are already king over all the land. What more could you want?" "Fish cannot make you emperor." Her eyes narrowed slightly, her tone sharpening. "If he can make me king, he can make me emperor. There is nothing beyond my reach." The fisherman hesitated. "It is too much. The fish will grow tired of our asking. We have already taken more than any should." But Ilsabel stepped closer, her voice low and firm. "I am king, and you are my husband. Go to him and tell him what I desire. Do not return without it." The fisherman's heart sank. He could see in her eyes that no argument would change her mind. The castle around them felt larger than ever, vast, echoing, somehow colder, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of every step he had taken to the sea before he turned and made his way toward the door. In his mind, The same thought, repeated like the tide. This will come to no good. The fisherman walked a long path toward the shore, the castle's high towers shrinking behind him until there were only dark shapes against the pale horizon. The wind had changed again, no longer sharp and fresh, but heavy, carrying with it a damp scent like wet earth. Each step felt slower, as though the air itself resisted his moving forward. When the sea came into view, he stopped. It was darker than he had ever seen it. Gone was the clear blue, the shifting green, even the restless gray. Now the water was thick and black, churning with streaks of mud that swirled like smoke. Small waves rolled in, not in a steady rhythm, but in strange, uneven pulses, as though the sea itself was uneasy. Above, the clouds pressed low and heavy, dimming the light until the shoreline looked like the edge of another world. A gust of wind swept over the water, bending the grass flat along the dunes. The fisherman stepped closer to the edge, his boots sinking into the cold, wet sand. He raised his voice, though it felt harder to speak here, as though the air wanted to swallow his words, and called out, "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife, Ilsebil, will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." From somewhere deep beneath the black surface, a shadow rose. The fish emerged, its scales dim under the heavy sky, its eyes fixed on him with a steady, unreadable gaze. "Well, fisherman," it said, "what does she want now?" The fisherman's voice was quiet, almost apologetic. She wishes to be emperor." The fish regarded him for a long, still moment. "Go home," it said at last. "She is emperor already." Without another word, it slipped beneath the swirling water, leaving the surface darker than before. The fisherman turned away, his heart heavy with the knowledge that each visit to the sea seemed to change it, and never for the better. The fisherman's path home took him through fields and winding lanes. But all the while, something shimmered faintly on the horizon. It was not the gray of stone or the green of trees. It was a glint, a glow, as though sunlight itself had been caught and hammered into shape. When he reached the edge of the castle grounds, he stopped. The simple towers and broad walls were gone, replaced by soaring battlements of solid gold that caught the light and sent it spilling across the landscape. The gates were twice as tall as before, each bar gleaming like molten metal frozen in place. Before them stood rows upon rows of guards, their armor polished to a mirror shine, their spears tipped with silver. The gates opened in perfect silence, and the fisherman stepped inside. The courtyard was vast, lined with statues of past rulers, their faces carved in stone, their robes trailing like frozen rivers of gold. The air was filled with the quiet sound of fountains, each one spilling water from the beaks of golden swans into pools rimmed with jewels. Inside, the great hall stretched farther than his eyes could follow. The walls were inlaid with patterns of gold and ivory, and the high ceiling was painted with scenes of battles, coronations, and endless processions. Every step along the carpeted floor seemed to echo softly, as though the hall itself was listening. At the far end, on a throne so high it seemed to touch the base of the vaulted ceiling, sat Ilsebil. The throne was a masterpiece of solid gold, carved into twisting shapes of dragons and crowned with a halo of light. She wore a crown so tall it seemed to defy balance, its frame set with rubies, emeralds, and sapphires that burned like fire when the light struck them. On each side of her stood an array of attendants, arranged from the tallest, a giant whose head nearly reached the roof beams, down to the smallest dwarf, no taller than the fisherman's hand. Before her waited princes, dukes, and earls, all bowing low. The fisherman approached slowly, his voice soft. "Wife, are you emperor now?" "Yes," she replied, her tone calm but edged with satisfaction. "I am emperor." He gazed up at her, the gold of the throne bright in his eyes. "What a fine thing it is to be emperor," he said at last. "Now, surely, we can rest." But Ilsabil leaned forward slightly, her eyes gleaming. "No," she said, "I will be Pope next." The fisherman stood at the base of the golden throne, her words still echoing in his ears. Pope. The very sound of it made him uneasy. It was a title unlike any other. It's one that belonged to a single person in all the world. "Wife," he said quietly, "how can you be Pope? There is but one Pope at a time, and the fish. The fish cannot make you Pope." Ilsabil's gaze did not waver. "Huh, if he can make me emperor, he can make me Pope," she said. "There is nothing beyond his power." "Go to him, ask." He shifted his weight uneasily. "I do not think it wise. Each time we ask, the sea grows darker, the air heavier. I fear what may come of it." Her voice sharpened, though she did not raise it. "I am emperor, and you are my husband. Go to him and tell him what I desire. Do not return without his answer, okay?" The fisherman knew there was no changing her mind. Her will was as fixed as the tides, as unyielding as the stone walls that surrounded her. And so he turned once more to the long path leading away from the golden palace, his boots striking the stones with slow, reluctant steps. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the pull of the sea, not as a welcome, okay, but as a summons, heavy and unavoidable. The fisherman stood at the base of the golden throne, her words still echoing in his ears. Pope. The very sound of it made him uneasy. It was a title unlike any other, one that belonged to a single person in all the world. "Wife," he said quietly, "how can you be Pope? There is but one Pope at a time, and the fish. The fish cannot make you Pope." Ilsabil's gaze did not waver. "If he can make me emperor, he can make me Pope," she said. "There is nothing beyond his power. Go to him, ask." Shifted his weight uneasily. "I do not think it wise. Each time we ask, the sea grows darker, the air heavier. I fear what may come of it." Her voice sharpened, though she did not raise it. "I am emperor, and you are my husband. Go to him and tell him what I desire. Do not return without his answer." The fisherman knew there was no changing her mind. Her will was as fixed as the tides, as unyielding as the stone walls that surrounded her. And so he turned once more to the long path leading away from the golden palace, his boots striking the stones with slow, reluctant steps. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the pull of the sea, not as a welcome, but as a summons, heavy and unavoidable. The road back from the sea wound through hills and narrow valleys, but the fisherman's eyes were fixed on the horizon. And there, rising higher and higher, the closer he came, was something unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was not a castle now, nor even a golden palace. It was a throne so large it seemed to scrape the edge of the clouds, its base resting on a platform that stretched for miles in every direction. The fisherman could hardly take it in at once. The great seat was carved from stone as pale as bone, its arms wrapped in spirals of gold, spag crowned with spires like cathedral towers. Ilsabil sat upon it, high above the world. On her head rested not one, but 3 crowns, each stacked upon the other, each more elaborate than the last. The lowest glimmered with gold, the middle shone with silver and pearls, and the highest sparkled with diamonds, so bright they seemed to hold their own light. Around her stretched a scene of impossible scale. To one side stood to endless rows of burning lights, the largest as tall as the tallest tower, their flames steady even against the wind. The smallest was no bigger than a candle flame, but it burned just as brightly. Priests, bishops, and cardinals stood in wide circles, their robes billowing gently in the breeze, their heads bowed. The fisherman moved forward, his steps muffled by a carpet so vast he could not see where it ended. Finally, he stood at the foot of the towering seat, looking up until his neck ached. "Wife," he called, his voice carrying upward into the still air. "Are you Pope now?" She answered, her voice echoing down like the toll of a great bell. "I am Pope." Stared at her, at the impossible height of her throne, the grandeur that surrounded her on every side. "It is a grand thing to be Pope," he said softly. "And now, surely, there is nothing greater to be." Ilsebel did not answer right away. Her gaze turned upward, beyond the spires of her own throne, toward the open sky and the faint shape of the moon hanging pale above it. Then she said, "I will think about that." The night passed slowly in the shadow of the towering throne. The fisherman lay in his chamber, though sleep would not come easily. The faint glow of the countless burning lights around the Pope's seat seeped through the curtains, casting long, shifting shapes across the walls. At last, in the hour before dawn, Ilsebel stirred. Her eyes opened, not to the gold and silver around her, but to the narrow window and the pale light spilling through it. Beyond, the first rim of the sun was rising above the hills, sending a wash of color into the fading night. The moon hung faintly in the opposite sky, pale and silent, ready to fade away. Ilsebel sat up slowly, her gaze fixed on the sunrise. After a long moment, she said, "After all, I cannot prevent the sun from rising, nor the moon from setting." She turned to the fisherman, her voice quiet but certain. "Husband, go to the fish. Tell him I must be lord of the sun and moon." The fisherman sat up in alarm. "Cannot you be content with being Pope? You have the highest seat in the world. There is nothing greater." Her eyes narrowed, though her voice stayed calm. "No, as long as the sun and moon move without my leave, I am not truly the ruler of all. Go at once." The fisherman's hands tightened on the blanket. "Ilsebel, I am afraid. The sea grows darker every time I return. The wind is stronger, the sky stranger. One day, the fish will say no." She leaned closer, her gaze unwavering. "Go to him," she said. "I must be master of the sun and moon." The fisherman rose slowly, his heart heavy, and stepped out into the pale morning light. The air felt charged, the kind of stillness that comes before a great storm. Far off, he could hear the low, distant roar of the sea, and he knew this walk would be unlike any he had taken before. The fisherman walked toward the shore with the dread heavy in his chest. The wind had risen sharply, tugging at his clothes and hissing through the grass along the path. The air tasted of salt and rain, sharp on his tongue, and each step seemed to bring with it a deeper, more menacing roar from the direction of the sea. When he crested the final rise, teased, the sight before him made him stop in his tracks. The sky was black, not the gray of storms past, but a deep, suffocating black that swallowed all trace of the morning. Bolts of lightning split the darkness in jagged flashes, turning the churning sea below into a chaos of white foam and shadow. Great waves rose up like moving mountains, their crowns whipped into spray by the furious wind. The sound was deafening, the crashing of water, the crack of thunder, the howl of the gale tearing across the beach. Trees bent low, their branches thrashing. Even the rocks along the shore trembled as the waves slammed against them again and again. Every few moments, a great swell would rise so high it seemed it might blot out what little light remained, before breaking apart in a roar that sent water rushing far up the sand. The fisherman's knees felt weak, but he forced himself forward, boots sinking deep into the wet sand. He cupped his hands to his mouth and shouted into the storm, his voice barely carrying over the rage of the wind and waves. "O man of the sea, hearken to me. My wife, Ilsebel, will have her own will, and hath sent me to beg a boon of thee." The sea heaved upward, and through the spray and lightning, the fish appeared. It was larger now, or perhaps The storm made it seem so, its eyes reflecting the flicker of lightning above. The fish's voice cut through the chaos. It was calm yet weighted with something final. What did she want now? The fisherman swallowed hard, rain running down his face. She wishes to be lord of the sun and moon. The fish's gaze lingered on him for a long, still moment, though the sea raged around them, and then spoke, each word clear as though the storm itself paused to listen. "Go home," it said, "to your pigsty again." Before the fisherman could answer, the fish was gone, swallowed by the towering black waves, and the shore seemed to shake with the crash of the sea closing over it. The fisherman turned from the raging shore, the roar of the Black Sea still pounding in his ears. The wind pushed at his back as he made his way up the path, but it no longer felt like a helping hand. It was colder, sharper, like the storm itself was urging him to hurry away. Each step seemed to pull him further from the towering palaces and endless halls he had walked through only days before. The air lost the scent of gold and incense. The ground beneath his boots felt rough and uneven once more. When he reached the place where the golden palace had stood, he stopped in silence. The castle was gone. The sprawling gardens, the high stone walls, the gates guarded by soldiers, all gone. In their place stood the same weathered pigsty he had known before. Its roof sagged, its crooked walls leaned against the wind, and a thin thread of smoke curled from the chimney dot inside. Ilsabel sat at the rough wooden table, her hands folded in front of her. Her rich gowns were gone, replaced by the same simple dress she had worn in the beginning. No crown sat upon her head, no servants waited at her side. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind outside, soft now, slipping through the gaps in the wooden walls. The fisherman stepped inside, closed the door against the breeze, and took his seat across from her. He looked at her for a time, then around the small, dim room, the room that was once again their home. And there, without words, they understood that the sea had given, and the sea had taken away. The fisherman turned from the raging shore, the roar of the Black Sea still pounding in his ears. The wind pushed at his back as he made his way up the path, but it no longer felt like a helping hand. It was colder, sharper, like the storm itself was urging him to hurry away. Each step seemed to pull him further from the towering palaces and endless halls he had walked through only days before. The air lost the scent of gold and incense. The ground beneath his boots felt rough and uneven once more. When he reached the place where the golden palace had stood, he stopped in silence. The castle was gone. The sprawling gardens, the high stone walls, the gates guarded by soldiers, all gone. In their place stood the same weathered pigsty he had known before. Its roof sagged, its crooked walls leaned against the wind, and a thin thread of smoke curled from the chimney dot inside. Ilsabel sat at the rough wooden table, her hands folded in front of her. Her rich gowns were gone, replaced by the same simple dress she had worn in the beginning. No crown sat upon her head, no servants waited at her side. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind outside, soft now, slipping through the gaps in the wooden walls. The fisherman stepped inside, closed the door against the breeze, and took his seat across from her. He looked at her for a time, then around the small, dim room, the room that was once again their home. And there, without words, they understood that the sea had given, and the sea had taken away. Night has come to the shore once more. The sky stretches wide and dark above the water, scattered with stars that tremble faintly in the distance. The moon hangs low, its pale light spilling over the quiet waves, turning them into a silver path that seems to lead beyond the edge of the world. The air is still. The only sound is the soft hush of the tide, the slow pull and release as the sea breathes against the sand. It is the same sound that has lived here for centuries before the fishermen, before the wishes, before the fish. The pigsty rests quietly on the hill, its windows dark, its roof leaning against the night wind. Inside, the fisherman sleeps, his breathing steady, his dreams touched by the faint scent of salt carried through the cracks in the walls. The gulls have tucked their heads under their wings. The grass bends in the breeze, and the world holds still, far out, where the water deepens and the moonlight fades. The sea keeps its own counsel. Bequeathed, it remembers the shimmer of gold scales, the sound of a man's voice calling over the waves, the weight of wishes that drifted too far. Tonight, it says nothing. The waves roll in and the waves roll back. Stars drift slowly across the sky, and the night, deep and endless, wraps itself around the shore, holding everything in its quiet hands. You could stand here forever, watching the silver path across the water. You could listen to the tide until you forget where the sea ends and the sky begins. You could let the sound carry you farther and farther till you drift into dreams. The sea is calm. The waves come in, the waves go out. The moonlight dances on the water. The stars watch from above. The night holds the shore. You breathe in, you breathe out. The sea breathes with you. The sea is calm. The waves come in. The waves go out. The sand is cool beneath your feet. The wind is gentle on your face. The sound of the tide is soft in your ears. You breathe in, you breathe out. The sea breathes with you. The sea is calm. The waves come in, the waves go out, and the night goes on, and on, and on. The day has faded completely now. The last colors of the sunset have slipped away beyond the horizon, leaving only the deep velvet of night. The moon has climbed higher, scattering silver light across the water in a path that seems endless, as if it might carry you to places far beyond sight. The fisherman's house sits quietly on the hill, small, leaning slightly against the wind, but warm inside. The faint orange glow from the hearth flickers against the walls, then dims as the fire settles into embers. The air inside is filled with the faint scent of wood smoke and salt. Ilsebill rests in silence, her face turned toward the window though. Her eyes are closed. The fisherman lies beside her, his breathing slow and steady, his hands folded on his chest. Outside, the world has grown still. The grass bends gently in the night breeze, whispering softly as it sways. Lone gull calls, once in the distance, then settles down among the rocks, tucking its head beneath its wing. The sand, cooled by the night air, lies smooth and unbroken, except where the waves curl gently in and slide away again. The sea keeps its rhythm. It's the same rhythm it has always known. It does not hurry. It does not slow. Each wave that comes and brushes the shore like a quiet hand, and each wave that leaves draws the sand back toward the wide, endless, deep dot, far out beyond the moon's silver trail. The water darkens and deepens, somewhere down there, far below the shifting surface. The fish swims, still silent now, hidden from all eyes, moving slowly through the shadows. It carries the memory of what was asked, and what was given, and what was taken away. But the sea does not speak of such things tonight. It only moves and breathes and waits. If you were to stand here at the edge of the tide, the sound would wrap around you. The hush, the pull, the soft sigh as the water meets the sand. It would slow. Your thoughts would make your breathing deeper, slower, steadier. And soon, you'll feel yourself drifting with it, as though the tide itself were carrying you away. The moon will set. The stars will fade, and the first light of dawn will find the shore again. The waves will still be moving, and the fisherman's house will still be standing. And the story, like the sea, will go on in silence. The last tide rolls in. The last tide rolls out, and the night holds everything. in perfect quiet. The sea is quiet. The moonlight rests upon the waves. The stars keep watch overhead. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night breathes with you. The sand is cool beneath your feet. The wind is soft against your skin. The air smells faintly of salt and distant rain. The waves roll in. The waves roll out. The sound never changes. The sea is quiet. Okay. The moonlight rests upon the waves. Okay. The stars keep watch overhead. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night breathes with you. There is no hurry. There is no end. The rhythm of the tide. Only the quiet of the night. Only the sea. Forever, the story is told. The wishes have risen and fallen like the tides. Castles, the thrones, the crowns, they have all slipped away, leaving only the sound of the sea. The fisherman's house rests quietly on the hill. It leans a little against the wind, its wooden door worn smooth by years of salt air. Inside, the hearth glows faintly, the last embers settling into a soft, red light. Expel sleeps in her narrow bed. The fisherman lies beside her, his breathing even, his face peaceful at last. Outside, the world is wrapped in stillness. The grass sways gently in the night breeze. The moon lays its silver path across the water, and the stars scatter above it like grains of light far below. In the deep places where no sunlight reaches, the fish swims slowly through the darkness. It does not rise. It does not speak. It remembers, as the sea remembers. The tide moves in. The tide moves out. The sound has no beginning, and it has no end. And as the waves whisper to the shore, the story fades, becoming part of the night, part of the wind, part of the sea. The waves come in. The waves go out. The moonlight moves across the water. You breathe in, you breathe out. The night breathes with you. The stars shine. The wind drifts. The sea whispers. The waves come in. The waves go out. The moonlight moves across the water. You breathe in. You breathe out. Taint. The night breathes with you, and beyond the shore, there is only quiet. Only quiet. Only quiet. The tide has settled into its slowest rhythm now, each wave folding softly into the shore like the turning of a page. The night is deep, the stars high and patient, the moon a pale lantern drifting across the endless water. There is no sound but the sea's steady whisper and the quiet sigh, the wind as it moves over the grass. The fisherman sleeps. His dreams are light and untroubled, carrying him to places where there are no thrones, no crowns, no voices calling him to the shore. Ilsabil sleeps, too, her breathing slow, her face turned toward the faint glow of the hearth. In this moment, they are no more than they were at the beginning, and no less. The house leans gently against the night breeze, its timbers creaking softly like the hull of a ship resting in calm waters. The earth beneath it is cool, the air around it touched by the salt of the sea. Above, the sky holds its shape, dark and endless, stitched with points of light, far below the surface of the water. Where the moonlight cannot reach, the fish moves slowly through the shadows. It does not rise. It does not speak. Its world is one of silence, broken only by the faint echo of the waves above. Perhaps it sleeps in its own way. Perhaps it simply waits, as it has always waited. The shore knows the truth of things, that all tides return, that every wave that leaves comes back again. The grass will grow in the spring, the gulls will cry over the rocks, and the sea will keep its rhythm, whether or not anyone listens. You could stand here forever, feeling the cool sand beneath your feet, watching the silver path of moonlight stretch across the water. You could breathe with the tide until your thoughts drift away, until there is nothing but the sound and the quiet between the sounds. The night holds steady. The stars keep watch. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the last wish has been carried away with the tide. Now there is only rest. The sea is at peace, and so are you.